This session we're returning to MERL again, and I just thought, as I was listening to Adrian, that there were some things I thought, oh yes, well, perhaps we should talk about that a bit to do with what we've been doing at MERL. So I just thought I'd start off with a very quick run through what I think we've been doing in terms of sustainability as the museum, and then move on to our plans for the garden. So as for us, as you know, we're part of the university, so we can do so much, but the real decisions are made on high. And one of the things that the university's put in place is sustainability champions. So within every directorate, a member of staff will be allocated. And the interesting thing is the first person that we had to do it was a conservator who has now left, and she was extremely keen to take part. And we now have a vacancy, and there's no one's particularly keen to take it on. And is that because we're worried about it's too much work? I think that's what's come forward. But then it's an important thing to do, and maybe our managers are not giving enough time for somebody to really concentrate on it. And then it's really valuable that you've got a whole post addressing it. And for us, a lot of it is people doing something else plus sustainability. So that was one thing. We've very definitely taken forward in terms of sustainable development goals. And that's the university with its strategy, but also at our level. And I think they were mentioned over various projects yesterday, but we have done work where we've gone out with choosing some sustainable development goals based on what people have either said, these are the ones that I think I could do something about as an individual, or these are the ones that I have no idea how on earth I could affect any change. And the latter was obviously very difficult for us to start doing supporting work, but the ones where people wanted to get involved sort of led us onto some of our public programmes, which I'll talk about in a minute. Travel, that resonated with us as well, that even when our lottery project was in full flow, the lottery had decided that they didn't like car parks. They didn't really have an answer to what you'd do instead, but they tended not to fund anything to do with car parks. So in a way, it's quite lucky that we've only got a very small space because of the design of the building and the front courtyard for parking. So we're not encouraging people to park. But we are you will have discovered in this, we're not really that far from the town centre, but there's a perception that this is a little bit out of the way. And so we've had to do quite a lot to promote the fact that you can walk here. The buses are a bit annoying as well, because there are certain routes around Reading, and this is not on one of them. It's a complicated bus journey, whereas there's a bus called the number 17, which is the one that everybody uses. And some communities around here would have to take 2 buses just to get here, even a very short distance, which is rather annoying. So we've been doing things like creating leaflets which explain how you can walk from the station, or you can walk from the other museum that we work with, Reading Museum. And also we're taking part in a walks festival. So encouraging people to not arrive here in a car. And so, having said that, a lot of people do arrive by car. Other things we do. Yes, we have solar panels on the building which has the archive store, the opposite side of the garden. And actually, whilst they were very pleased about it to start with, there was a fire on one of them, not here, but elsewhere on the campus. And that's made people terribly nervous from a collections point of view about doing this. But inside, again, the store is very high spec because it's a requirement for archive accreditation, they're sort of British Library standards. And our conservator, who's not an archive trained person, thinks they're completely over the top. And he would say that nationally, the archivists have got it wrong. They've gone for the highest possible spec, and it's not entirely necessary. But it does mean it's very, very, it uses a massive amount of energy. And he was actually rather pleased when it was broken down for a bit and said, see, everything's fine, even though, the air handling system isn't working quite as we thought. So that's another interesting one, the sort of professional standards versus doing something for the environment. You will notice as well that we have a manicured lawn, and this has been an interesting sort of debate for us, because the university has a grounds department, and traditionally the gardens here would have been managed by them. And we were always very grateful that they'd turn up with a big sit-on lawn mower and they will mow the lawn every week in the high season. But we're just beginning to think about whether that's actually a bad idea. But then we have that versus the cafe and income generation and also access, that people who have mobility issues and things, they actually want very clear cut paths, and they prefer things being cut sometimes. So we are thinking about it. The grounds department, they also are clearly thinking about how to be a bit more sustainable, but their idea is to put meadow-like flowers instead of any planting, such as we've got some of the old plants there. They don't go back to the Edwardian era, but they reflect the fact that Edwardian era of the building, and they would very happily take all those out and plant it with a meadow that wouldn't need any maintenance. And we feel that you lose a lot by doing that wholesale. So we've been sort of fighting that. So that's the issue for us. Anyway.
How did we make it work last time?
You just clicked on the PowerPoint presentation with the mouse, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, shall I carry on with this one? No. Marvellous. So, you might have seen yesterday there were some references to Edinburgh Gallery in the early days of us redeveloping the museum, and I think this term came from our designers. And they immediately looked on the garden as a gallery in its own right, and coined the phrase the Edible Gallery. But at that point, we had very little that was food growing there. We have, as part of the development project, got these raised beds, and then we have 2 other beds that are used, and they're all used by community groups. They're not owned by community groups, but we negotiate with them to take over a space for a period of time, and then they get moved around. But the idea for the designers was that we should have all things food, and they even said we should move the farmers market from the middle of town to be hosted here. We should keep sheep, we should keep chickens, we should do that. And we went, no, we can't do that. We were still feeling as though this was way too much of a commitment for us. But what we did do is obviously the raised beds. You'll see a shepherd's hut there. We got some money from the Friends of the University, and it's not an historic vehicle, and it was a maker from Gloucestershire. But it's been a lovely place for young children to play, and it's also the location for a lot of knitted things from our knitted group, so that's been popular as well. So this is a drawing of sort of what we have of the space. You can see it's quite a substantial space that we could use for all sorts of things. And another issue is it's got a lot of really, to me, interesting mature trees. And our estates department or the grounds department is managed by someone who is a tree specialist, but specialises in chopping them down. So he's always saying, I've got permission for this one. We say, but we didn't want that one to go. And he's like, well, he'll walk around and give them a shove and then say that, yeah, that's got to go. And I think his whole attitude about what's sustainable and what it means, because I mean, I'm talking to somebody about this, that even a dying tree is of interest in terms of sustainability, as long as it's not dangerous. It has a role to play. But because we had some of these trees around here, we were able to have an idea of a woodland space so that children could walk with trees on either side, and there'd be a place for them to sit and hear stories and so on. You will have noticed we do actually now have chickens, and this really came about, I can blame Ollie for this, because almost by the back door, we had a grant from the Wellcome Trust, and part of it was to be spent on artist residencies. And in fact, it was an Irish artist, took the work, and what she decided would be her artistic endeavour was to create a hen house. And so the structure that you can see here, we have played around with it a bit, expanding it and so on. You can see originally it had a cedar roof, which now doesn't, because sadly it didn't last for years on end. But she was interested in the notion of a hen house, and she had actually suggested we had cutout hens, but we thought, no, we'll get some hens. And having got them, we've never been able to not have them. And so we were on to probably about the third generation now. And not that the children know that, but it has made a huge difference to people to see hens. But of course, one of the things that they tend to think about is the eggs, not the roast chicken. And I think there's a lot of more work we can do on that area. So we have the chickens. We've also got in the garden a play tractor, which is a Fordson, I'm afraid, not a Ferguson. But, and this was quite controversial in the planning, and it really came out of the fact that people want to climb on things inside the museum all the time, and rather than sounding terribly negative, saying get off, don't touch that, can't do it, we said, well, there is something in the garden. But it was quite a departure for us to start getting play equipment of any sort. And actually, once it's been in place, it's almost as though it's never been without it. It's been hugely popular, and we commissioned a maker really via Avon Museum. So Stephen, who's gone, who was with us yesterday, it was his predecessor, I think. I went to visit various timber play pieces that they had in the open air museum, and this company hadn't made a tractor before, but they came and looked at what we had and they modelled it on there. And they are a company that have the right qualifications for play equipment, and they come and maintain it. But nevertheless, because we haven't gone for a sort of typical playground piece, it does need maintenance and it won't last forever. And now we have the issue that having put a play area in, you can't ever get rid of it, that we will need to replace it with something else. Not that we sort of don't want to, but it's become another thing, another aspect of what the museum offers. With the space in the garden, Philippa has been looking at health and well-being and how museums can contribute to that. And we had some funding for a project called Thriving Communities. And it was funding to connect providers like ourselves with health and wellbeing organisations. So we became the host for Sport in Mind. You can see a t-shirt. They're Tai Chi classes for older people, and that's particularly been a good thing to offer post-COVID. And the idea of getting people out to take part in things once again. We also had mother and baby yoga. That has worked, but I think has been less successful since they're less accommodating about going indoors when it's raining. They don't like it. They feel they should have a bigger space than we can offer, but that's the way it goes. But the Tai Chi people have continued in all weathers. So going back to the sustainability goals, our green stories that which is a sort of whole programme that we've created from that, was thinking about how different age groups could encounter the outdoors. We're not really the countryside, but it is the outdoors. And a colleague of ours who had children of the right sort of age. And I think that's often the impetus, that when you realise what it's like to be a young parent and what's there and what you need, it suddenly becomes very clear what you can do. And she set up this initiative called Friday Fledglings, and it's a session for under fives and their carers. And we put out water play, you can see, and also we have a mud kitchen, and we have storytelling. We have the woodland area is sort of set out with little activities, and sometimes people do things like bug hunts and so on. And we have had speakers in to talk to the carers, like for instance, an academic who was looking at how you encourage children to eat vegetables, and there was the theory that you had to try them 3 times, and how you set up occasions when children could just try things. And they came along and spoke to parents, so that was a sort of good connecting point. So we did the under fives. That was incredibly popular, and I know that there's a friend of mine who lives, I don't live in Reading, but where I live, said her daughter said her friend has moved to Reading. The best thing in the whole of the town is this session, not including all other activities for all age groups, and it's regularly completely oversubscribed. And again, it would be something that we couldn't do without that. And then they've layered in since then something for primary age children, so 5 to 11, and that's called Green Explorers, and is slightly more scientific, slightly more task-based, and the person who runs it is Forest School trained. I don't know if that's something that resonates with. Forest School is a sort of training which is about a little bit about coping with the outdoors. And the whole point is being outside, and you go out in all weathers. That's the point of it. And one of the big sticking points for us was that in order to be true forest school, you have to light fires. And to start with, our archivists were like, no, it's bad enough with solar panels. We're not going to have children lighting fires in the galleries and stuff, in the garden. But even the archivists have been won over now, and we have acquired a small fire pit, and it is very controlled. But we do have children working with a fire and say cooking things on the fire. So that has been a popular move. That's the interior of the Shepherd's Hut, and it's become you can see a venue for all these knitted things, but they're not by any means random. They relate to programs that we're offering. So if we haven't got an example of something that someone's talking about, they will knit it. And that's what a lot of this is about. And they do things like wreaths for different seasons, so that you can anticipate what are the sorts of things to look for in spring, and what sorts of flowers are going to be out in the summer. So all this has been going on for up to 10 years, and we're now at a stage where we think we want to do something more substantial. And this is a working document for us. We're nowhere near achieving all of this, but we've been meeting as a group to discuss a possible application to large funders to develop the garden. And what we feel is that we've been adding things a bit here and there ad hoc, and just where it fits for the moment, but we wanted to remodel the whole garden. So we want to replant. We don't want to have entirely wild meadows, but we want to replant where some of the plantings don't really make sense anymore. So we could have more. We do have a herb garden, but one thought is that we could look at particular herbs that we use in the traveller community, or theme the plantings around a sort of international, global dimension, whereas the garden was never really planned in that way before. Something else that has been flagged up very much because we have a member front of house whose husband uses a wheelchair, is that it's quite an inaccessible garden in lots of ways. It may be flat, but actually if you're in a wheelchair, it's not that flat. And there are slopes, which are quite attractive for children's activities, but they're pretty difficult to negotiate with if you're pushing somebody in a wheelchair. So we wanted to have some accessible paths through. So we've got a possible new sensory planting. We've got historic plantings around here where we're right next to the older building, the archive building. And we have a drainage problem, which has never been sorted out, so that when it rains a lot, there's a massive puddle which takes away gradually. So we want to sort that one out. The wheelchair. Then the other thing we wanted to do was, rather than having a sort of bit of a hodgepodge of activity, we wanted to have a zone that was about play, which is here, a zone that's about cafe and seating and, to be frank, income generation, that we can expand our cafe out and have more people there. And then a zone that's about food and growing. And so this is where we've got to, but you can see in the top right corner, it says outdoor classroom and resources storage. And then this is an interesting one for us, because actually, arguably, why would you go outside to go back inside again? That we're now dedicating more space to the inside and offering in a classroom. But Philippa, who's a very positive person about this, says, I can't, I'm reaching capacity, I need space to do more work. So what we're aiming to do is to get one of those garden office buildings that are you don't require planning permission for, and you can get green suppliers, and they, you know, the materials should be more recyclable than us building a brand new construction in the garden. But we found in approaching some funders, they still see that as capital works. And so you get stuck with the funders that don't want to fund capital. But this is a tool for us to deliver activity. So we're going to have to persuade them on that level. Then yes, in the far corner, we've got the wilderness area. So these are the main things that we're thinking about. I think that might be. And that's an example of the sort of thing we mean by the office building. Mine is the sofa, of course. We have looked at other possibilities. Our forest school teacher quite favoured something that just keeps the rain off a bit, and it's open 4 sides, more like a sort of a workshop space that a carpenter or something might work in. But Philippa, for instance, really wants for people's access needs a proper space that they can sit and do things. She does a lot of work with special needs groups, and she says that there have been a lot of comments about it. It'd be handy to have a space that you can, that's out in the garden. You don't have to come all the way back in here to go and look at things and sit at a table. So that's where we're going with that, and wish us luck in getting the